White, and I will be reading the word. So we'd start with, they say, I am illegal. But so was anyone who ever rolled through a stop sign, jaywalked, or threw trash on the ground. Not having a visa is a civil infraction, not a federal crime. They say I'm here to take your jobs. But the jobs are often backbreaking and underpaid, and we are exploited by those who can never find a U.S. citizen to work under such conditions. But it is the U.S. consumers buying the drugs and U.S. weapons in the hands of the desperate. They say I am here to live off the system. But I pay taxes too, and yet I live in a shadow economy that denies me the benefits of a secure old age and medical care if I get hurt on the job. They say English is the only language we're speaking. But the true heritage of the United States is diversity, and I add my words and my traditions to the culture that enriches us all. They say I am here just to have my baby. But can you remember another mother who braved hardship and danger to bring her baby safely into this world? Can you deny Mary or Maria the right to fight for a better life for her child? They say But what about the student who overstays her visa, the artist who cannot marry his American boyfriend, or the grandmother who cares for the baby while the mother works? We may not all wear boots, we may have come from many countries, and yet we are alike. They say that the more I have, the less you have. But you are not diminished if I am raised up. Humanity is enriched when we climb together toward the light. Life is not a zero-sum game. Thank you.
Yesterday, Mike and I took a walk on the lake with our dogs, and we were excited. We'd been watching. Where are the different ducks? We've been seeing the mallards, a few wood ducks, but where are the winter ducks? And then finally, there must have been 30 ring-necked ducks, 2 hooded mergansers, 10 common mergansers, but most exciting to me, 4 male canvasbacks. We headed home for our camera and binoculars and took pictures and enjoyed them very much. The canvasbacks are late. I would have expected them to be gone, and we haven't seen them in our part of the lake before. So it was a great surprise. They are headed north for the winter. They are going up to northern U.S., Canada, Alaska, to their breeding grounds. Signs of nature mark the change of the seasons for me. There's changes in foliage, the length of day, but I'm most excited by the comings and goings of animals. The comings and going, or migrations, have amazed people over the years. Scientists are still discovering more and more about how complicated migration patterns are and how animals find their way. They migrate to avoid extreme cold or heat, to find food or water, return to places where they can bear their young. It's all very mysterious. And when I was a kid, we learned how the birds fly south for the winter. But some birds more north of us might fly here. Some of ours might fly south. Some of us might stay. It's a lot more hodgepodge. And so how a particular bird or group of animals decides to migrate, there's still a great mystery to it. They use a variety of ways. They follow their circadian rhythms. They feel their hunger and thirst growing. They look at the moon and the stars. They feel the pull of Earth's magnetic fields. They watch for landmarks that they remember. And young animals often get lost their first migration and end up in the totally wrong place, not remembering these landmarks and also smells, certain smells. So it's some combination of instinct and learning. Sea turtles cross oceans to return to the same beach where they were born to lay their eggs. Humpback whales travel 5,000 miles a year. They travel to the cooler polar regions in the summer where food is abundant, and then back to warm waters to give birth. Wildebeest follow the rains, which give life to the plants that they graze on for their very survival. Mammals, birds, fish, insects, reptiles, and more have to migrate. It's a matter of their survival. When animals are unable to migrate, their numbers decline and species may even become extinct. Other species are interconnected with their web of life, and they can be greatly impacted or even become extinct too. Mike and I recently took a trip to the Rio Grande Valley. If you're wondering why, you don't know me well. Birds. It was for birds. We went to a bird fest, the Rio Grande Valley Bird Festival in southern Texas. And one of their favorite field trips was on a pontoon boat that went down the Rio Grande River. We sat and we looked across into Mexico. We saw beautiful green jays, summer tanagers, greened, ringed, and belted kingfishers, great kistides, and whistling tree ducks with their tangerine beaks. Beautiful birds. We saw resorts on the other side of the river. We saw parks. We saw homes. We saw beautiful habitat for birds. We also saw the Border Patrol pass us on a little boat in their fatigues with their guns. And when the boat turned and we were faced more with the other side, we saw a big, tall, ugly wall. Some of the habitat and birds remained, but they were much harder to notice against the ugly background of the wall. That wall was built to keep people out. Sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes people still get in, but they go through more suffering and peril to do so. Or sometimes they die on their way, leaving loved ones behind. That wall also stops the natural migration of many animals. And they're seeing that jaguars, ocelots, Sonoran pronghorns, bears, Mexican gray wolves, and other animals are reducing their crossings by 80%, disrupting their search for food, water, and mates. Smaller animals like birds, as well as plants, are also disrupted by the wall. It's just so sad. The only thing I can think about that wall is like most things are not permanent. An example of this is on the Klamath River between 2023 and 2024, 4 dams were removed. 4 dams were removed. This was the work of many people. Scientists from the state and federal government were involved, as well as the Klamath, Yurok, and Kuruk tribes worked together. And it's been wonderful. Many people have reported that the salmon are everywhere. They are occupying areas where they haven't been seen for over 100 years. They are coming back. So it is sad, many things that are happening today, but those dams were so solid, concrete, huge, built to last and stay there forever, and now they're gone. So may we remember that today is not how things will always be, and we can help shape the future. Amen. And now I'm going to ask Lucy to come up and give us some perspective about human migrations.
Good morning. I'm the human migration person. And that was so lovely, Asia. It's hard to beat that. But when Asia asked me, I thought, okay, yeah, I think we can do this. As an anthropologist historian, I think about current migration and immigration problems a lot. And I see another chapter in the long, long story of human migration. History happening as we speak. We're all the children of migrants. Migration is nothing new in the human family. Today we're seeing it in real time, the latest chapter in a phenomenon that has occurred since the beginning, humans seeking more food or a better life. The earliest and perhaps longest migrations were mainly on foot, but they occurred slowly and incrementally, sometimes through generations. Most of you know that our earliest ancestors walked, generation by generation, out of Africa into the Middle East, then west to Europe, and east through Asia, out of Asia into Australia, or across the land bridge between Siberia and Alaska, and then south, with humans eventually reaching the southern tip of South America, populating all the lands of planet Earth except Antarctica. Eventually, as we see today, migrations began affecting two populations as migrants displaced earlier populations or were absorbed by them. So I'd mainly today like to share with you a little-known migration that occurred right here in the Sacramento Valley, and I'll go into it in a little more detail because it helps explain some of our recent struggle with the accurate wording of our land acknowledgement, our UU land acknowledgement. The archaeological record shows that the first early peoples who lived here in the Sacramento Valley were a seed grinding tradition related to Great Basin tribes and distinguished in the archaeological record by the uses of large flat metates or grinding stones, and they're kind of big flat like that. Living to the north at the same time on the Columbia Plateau was a thriving population which depended mainly on the riverine resources for their existence and who used the mortar and pestle to grind acorns. Then, about 5,000 years ago, there was a period of widespread climate warming. Does that sound familiar? Which dried up smaller streams, gradually forcing the population to converge on the mid-Columbia River basin, which gradually became overpopulated for the resources that were available. These people had in common a root language called Penutian. And here we're going to get just a little academic. Through a linguistic technique known as glottochronology, which calculates how long ago groups of people diverged into separate languages by the amount of differences from the root language and from each other, we can trace some migrations by language. The linguistic evidence shows that Penutian speakers began spreading out along existing river systems, spilling down the Willamette River Valley and into successive river drainages, and then eventually hopping over the Siskiyous to the headwaters of the Sacramento River, and from there, continuing moving south through the generations, eventually populating most of the interior of California, lands now known as the tribal territories of the Maidu, the Miwok, the Wintu, and the Yokuts tribes. All are archaeologically distinguished by mortar and pestles rather than by metates. The intrusion of the Penutian speakers apparently pushed out an earlier people, those who used the metates, whose root language was Hokan, and pushed them into peripheral lands that are geographically difficult, such as the areas around Mount Lassen, where the tribes such as Ishis Yahi, who even into historic times spoke languages rooted in Hokan, the macro language of the Great Basin. And this explains why no local natives could understand Ishis language. Most of you probably know that story. because it was as unintelligible to Maidu as English and Chinese are to us today. In other words, they're entirely different language families. Now, kind of bring it down to the more personal level. In my family, my maternal grandmother's family came to America in the 1600s. Based on the birthplaces of 5 children, 2 in England, 1 in France, and the youngest 2 in America, it seems that they were among the many who went first to France and from there to America. Protestants escaping persecution in England as the Catholic Church was regaining power after the reign of Henry VIII. So all migrations have reasons. And while a few people may strike out for just pure adventure, most people don't leave a beloved home, leaving close family behind, except for cause. Political or religious persecution, poor economic conditions, war, sometimes and often simply survival, in the hope of a better life. Migration usually comes with some amount of uncertainty and even danger. My maternal grandmother's family came from England not so long ago, actually in the 1860s, from a long line of George Hayeses, who had lived in Manchester, England. The 7th George Hayes left England about 1865. But he died during the voyage, and his wife arrived alone in America with a 5-year-old, the 8th George Hayes, my great-grandfather. So what were your family migration stories? Behind the basic facts of human lives and basic genealogy, the ones who left home, who faced risks, who worked hard and finally established themselves in a new land. We're all children of migration, somewhere, somehow, and we need to remember that. And so I'm going to end on a little different note by raising the possibility of future migrations. We know that climate warming is already making portions of our world increasingly uninhabitable. Not long ago, I saw a map showing that eventually Chico, amazing, I was just amazed, Chico will be right on the line between habitable and uninhabitable portions of North America. Will Chicoans of that time live in an air-conditioned technological bubble of some sort, or will they migrate north?
Hello, everyone. My name is Joanna Campos, and I am dedicating this reflection to the 20 children I spend my days with in room 23 at Gerber School. Daily, they show me things about myself and the world through all of the unpredictable things they do and say. I love them all very much, and they have been my favorite class, as of yet. I was born in the Los Angeles Women's Hospital on November 4th, 1982. Only 2 years prior, my parents had immigrated to the United States from El Salvador in order to escape a civil war that would go on to last over a decade and be responsible for the death of approximately 75,000 people, mostly civilians. My parents, newlyweds, came separately without legal documentation. My mother was fortunate enough to take the easier route. She flew in on a regular tourist visa and overstayed. My dad, however, was less fortunate, as he had no choice but to travel by foot, bus, and train to cross the Mexico-US border, a final leg of a journey that he made from the inside of a car's hot trunk. He was only 21 years old at the time, and yet bold enough to bring along with him 2 toddler nieces of his. In 1984, Ronald Reagan granted 2.7 million immigrants amnesty through the Immigration Reform and Control Act. My mother and father later became US citizens, and as a result, my 3 siblings and I never had to carry the shame and fear of being here illegally. I teach 3rd graders in a dual immersion Spanish immersion program in Gerber, a small rural town in Tehama County you're likely aware of. Many of my students have parents who themselves have recently immigrated without proper documentation. This year has been, still is, and sadly will continue to be psychologically challenging for them, as these young children have not themselves been spared from carrying with them the burden of shame and fear that I myself once was spared from, and that comes from the stigmatization of not belonging. As an educator who centers her teaching around social justice, I felt and continue to feel that I should and even must do something so that my students hear again, know, and believe that I empathize with their fear. I want them to know that I do not agree with these far-reaching and targeted anti-immigrant, anti-immigration policies that are causing them, their families, and particularly where I work in Gerber, their friends and peers as well to feel othered. A primary objective I have as an elementary school teacher is to ensure that each and every single one of my students feels a sense of belonging in my classroom. Take, for example, the following. I, along with my student teacher extraordinaire, Gladimar Martinez, have jointly decided to teach a 6-week language arts unit covering immigration in order to create space for students to voice fears they may have, express their thoughts, and perhaps even raise questions and opinions of their own regarding immigration. We began by teaching them about animal migrations, with an emphasis on the astounding salmon and monarch butterfly migrations, and used the learnings from these lessons to build a bridge that would support them as they transitioned into talking about human migration. We want them to think critically about why people leave their home, why they leave their home countries to begin with. We want them to explore the idea of fronteras, or borders. We had hoped in the beginning that they would start to ask themselves whether it is fair to punish people as if they were criminals simply for their migrating. Ultimately, we want them to challenge the negative narratives about immigrants in order to see their parents and themselves as nothing other than bold and courageous humans who took on the trials of immigration in order to survive. At the beginning of the unit, I asked my students to tell me who an immigrant was. And some of the responses they gave me were, La migra, ICE, will come get them. They are illegal. They can't be here. They need to go back to their country. Trump hates them. This past week, as we concluded our 6-week unit, I asked the students the same question, and their responses demonstrated evidence that some important learning had occurred. This time, they said things like, immigrants are people who left their country because their homes were no longer safe. Immigrants are people who want better schools. Immigrants are people who need to find work to feed their families. Immigrants and salmon both have to cross borders. Immigrants are people who will risk their lives to cross borders because they want a better life. My parents are immigrants. Last Friday, each of my students wrote a letter to Governor Newsom. These letters were written with conviction that their knowledge and their ability to write could cause a shift toward a change that they hope to see, and that their voice is a powerful tool that can propel us from where we are today a bit closer to where we hope to go, where we're going. All of us began our weekend feeling the powerful agents of change that the world needs right now. We left the classroom Friday afternoon touched by a hope that someday immigration will no longer be a crime, and immigrants will not have to carry that burden of shame, a burden that I and my siblings may have been protected from, but that a majority of my students and their peers have been compelled to bear and bear silently. Gracias.
Wow. May we leave today remembering that each of us has always been, at some time, been lost, been in a new place, been trying to find our way. And certainly, I've never been in this extreme of situation, but I can remember many times in my life starting a new job, starting new school, moving to a new place where I felt away from home, and it was made easier by the kindness of strangers. So it's hard for me to think about how unkindly some people are treated when they're in a much harder situation. So I think that's a good place to think, is how we can welcome people more and address this issue in a way that's more like we're not dealing with criminals. We're dealing with human beings that are migrating to survive, for a better life, to feed their children, to take care of their elders, just trying to find their way and get by.